Welcome to the Growth Whisperers Podcast, where everything we talk about is about building enduring great companies and enduring great teams and enduring great products and enduring great experiences. I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm joined today, as I'm always, with my co-host, Brad Giles. Brad, how you doing today?
I'm doing very good, very good. Summertime here in Australia. Lots of beach time, lots of pool time. We've just come out of the holidays, which has been an awesome time. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Well, it's the opposite season, as we know, and it's winter time and mountain time, and had a chance to be in the snow and the cold, and actually had a fun experience. My kid's puppy, now almost a year old, got a chance to play in the snow and got completely impacted with snow on its whole underside. It took us like an hour to get these frozen ice cubes that had his hair twirled up into tight little knots. A poor little guy. So yeah, we're enjoying the opposite season, and yeah, it's great. It's great to be into 2021, 2020 behind us, and yeah, it's good. So life is good. Tell me, what do we have on today? What are we talking about today?
It's something that we see quite often, and it's finding the right person to run your business. Sometimes you may not be able to run your business, or you may not want to run your business. Perhaps you've got another venture that's taking up your time. Maybe you want to semi-retire, or maybe you want to go skiing full time. Who knows? But you and I often see situations where people need someone else to run their business, and they're taking a back step. Maybe they're going to just be the chairperson on the board or something like that. And so how do you find, or what do you do to find the right person to run your business? What are the best practices around that? Really interesting and challenging subject. So hard. I've seen it turn to custard so many times.
Yes. And for so many different reasons. So we're looking, this is one of the biggest moves. It's one of the most professional moves you can make in business, is to build something and then have someone else take it over, and ideally have them do a better job than you did. So the ideal, the optimal, and most people don't do a great job of this, but the ideal is to be grooming 2 or 3 people over 2 or 3 or 5 years. This thing we talk about all the time called succession planning, but is to do it and to do it well, and to always be prepared for this. And the best leaders we look at or work with, they'll always have a few people that they're grooming. And one of the things Warren Buffett does is he tells his CEOs that he works with every year to tell him, if they get hit by the bus, who to put in charge. So it's almost a pre-designated annual successor. So that's an emergency mechanism. But what we're looking at here is how do you make sure you're ideally grooming people? And so we'll take a few minutes to talk about what that looks like. That's plan A. And then we'll talk about
best practice.
It is. And it's something people should be doing. And, shockingly, sometimes it's the guy or gal down on the maintenance floor who ends up being with you for 10 or 15 or 20 years, who sometimes ends up being the best candidate. I've seen it a lot of times. Yeah. Those motivated people coming throughout the ranks, ideally, they've got to work in a number of different departments, and that is the best. I'll give you an example. So one company I worked with in another country, substantial business. The CEO that had been running it, he was not the founder. He was an employee who was running it. He came out of the accounting team, but he was a very sharp, motivated, aggressive accountant. So he knew the business incredibly well. And then he went on to be the CEO. Well, going back a few years, we started working with him on his succession for who's the next person. And we had 2 different people that we were considering. There was a third, but not really, but 2. And with both of those people, we started doing some assessment. We were doing some coaching, and we were getting them to go and take some courses to go and enhance their skills. And we were giving them challenging extra projects that normally would have fallen onto the CEO's plate. So over a course of 18 months, it was crystal clear. Of the 3, we know we probably had 2. of the two, only one of them was that successor. The other one just didn't make it. But we knew that one, if
Yeah.
needed, that person could be an excellent, at least short-term, but potentially long-term successor. Now, that CEO is still there running it. He could run it for another 3 to 5 years. There might be somebody else, but that development is there, and if needed, we could make a move. So that is the ideal thing to do, consciously giving these people projects, responsibilities, and development to enhance their skills and build them towards the role.
And you're test driving. You're
Yes.
test driving what could happen. Interestingly, coming at it from another level, and that is mental health. Surprisingly
Yep.
enough. So one of the questions that I ask with the leaders that I work with often is, so tell me, what has been the last holiday that you've taken, or when was the last holiday that you've taken, which was more than 2 weeks or 3 weeks? And many times they reply saying, it's been 12 years since I started this business. I haven't had more than 2 weeks in that whole time. And so I
Right.
say, well, why don't we set a goal sometime in the future? It could be a week or 10 years where you will have more than 4 weeks off. Let's go for 5. So we try to say we'll have 5 weeks off, because the business has to course correct and run itself in that time. Now, and then we work towards that. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Who's going to
Yep.
author? How is it all going to work? And it's funny enough how surprised they always are that the business just seemed to keep on running. It just
Yeah,
sometimes
especially
even runs
especially
better.
for smaller companies where they think that they're indispensable, and it
Yeah.
works. The other thing that I do, and it's in one of the chapters in Your Oxygen Mask First, the book that I wrote a few years ago. It's called Make Yourself Useless. One of the chapters, which is to build a team so strong there's not much you need to do, which fits in line with this. Many people are so integral into the daily operations of a business that they can't extract themselves and take those holidays, or they can't have the business function without them being involved 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
So it's just, it all comes down to building a team that is so damn strong you can get out of the way and allow them to continue to do their thing. And whether it means more time off, it means another business, it means succession and just going to the board. The key is growing and developing people proactively, and most people don't put any time into it. It's closer to the survival of the fittest. That's
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
most of that succession tends to happen in most companies, especially when they're smaller.
So really, best practice is select 2 to 3 leaders in your business, or people in your business who could become a, a leader, a CEO, or whatever you want to call it, to run the business in 2 to 3 years, and work on and coach and develop them, even if they don't even know it yet. I've had several leaders
Yes,
who've said to me, "This is the person I want to run this business," and we've kind of worked without them even knowing to develop their skills and to get them
correct.
better. So that's
Yeah,
the best case
and ideally,
scenario.
and if you don't have any options, you have these key seats that report directly to you. People in those seats, many of them should have the ability to.
Yeah.
So then you got to think of, what can I do to make sure the people that report to me, at least a couple, could take my job. If none of them could take your job, it's not a great scenario. So
Well, there's more
that's
work to
log.
be done.
Exactly. There's a great opportunity for you to build some succession and backup into as a side note. One of the CEOs we work with is really big on this, and they even have a plan of what happens if something happens to them.
Yeah.
Sadly, we had a CEO that we did some work with their company, and we hadn't really engaged deeply with them yet, but a CEO who passed away at a very young age, very suddenly, and
Hmm.
left a business without a leader. And we're doing some work right now to work with them on figuring out that transition, which is pretty challenging. It's kept my team busy over the holidays. But the key is to know what happens and to acknowledge that some stuff does happen, and we'll talk about that. And so this other CEO that we worked with for years, they have a 90-day transition plan. What happens if the CEO gets hit by a bus?
Mm.
What happens? And we have an advisory board that becomes a formal board. Then the board will take charge, and the board can do things. And then it's figuring out how do we then get this hire or figure out and potentially promote someone to become the next CEO. It's a very detailed what if plan, which is a very responsible thing. And that's what we should. And most people won't have the plan, but many people may find themselves in that situation.
Yeah. And so what we're really doing here is we're saying best practice is what you do is plan 2 to 3 years out, get people from within the business to step up. They will have the culture, they will have the values alignment, they'll have the respect of their peers. And so it will be a much easier and more effective transition. Potentially, it's like they will just grow into that job, but you can't always do that. One of the stories I wrote about in my book was in Australia, there was a mining company that was working in Africa. And quite successful. They went into Africa. They had developed a mine there, and the CEO, along with the board, flew to look at this mine, and there was some problems. And they were supposed to take 2 planes because the board's charter said they couldn't all fly together. They did, because one of the planes didn't work, and they were celebrating the opening of the mine. And this was a really successful up-and-coming company. The plane crashed and they all died. And so they lost the CEO and the whole board in one hit. That's a terrible, tragic story. But purely to illustrate, things happen. Hopefully not as terrible things as that. And your example, sometimes it's just, you know what, I'm too busy doing something else.
Or sometimes they get burnt out and psychologically destroyed, and they need a recovery period, or who knows what. The point of it is, what do we do when it happens suddenly? You should be proactive when we ideally build up people, and so you're prepared. But if you're not, what do you do when all of a sudden, we need a CEO, right? Or whatever it happens to be. Got to bring a little Canadian cheese into that.
That export grade cheese coming back into this episode.
Export grade, you got it. So the first thing is, whether it's urgent for whatever reason, let's assume that you're still involved, and it's not that a medical issue or something happened, but if it has to happen quickly for some reason, you just got to make sure that the person in charge is ready to let go and have someone else run the business psychologically. And that's in the ideal case, or in the sudden case. Sudden case makes it easier because there's a little more urgency. But for a lot of people, it's like having someone else raise your child.
Yeah.
Right. And even when the business has been sold and the founder has been paid a whack load of money, but someone else is coming in to run the business, psychologically, it's very challenging, and people often get in their way. So even
for many leaders, for many leaders, the business, it represents who they are. The business that defines their character and who they are. And so to give that to someone else is really challenging. So you got to be ready to do that. You got to be ready to say, I don't want to have the ego. I don't want to have the perks, the stimulation that come with, and the power that come with running this business day to day.
Yeah. And the headaches too.
The headaches too.
And but the key is to be psychologically ready for someone to come in with different ideas and to take things you've done for years and probably do it differently, and not to be involved, the ego and the pride and the excitement of being involved in every decision, but to really be okay with it being different. I met a guy 20 years ago. And I remember he owned 5 different nightclubs, back in the day when people would get together in person without masks and, be
Yeah.
shoulder to shoulder and body to body in a club. He owned 5. And he said to me something he had learned early in his career. He goes, well, like if I have one, I can run it at 100% and it can be outstanding. But if I have 5, they're probably going to run at about 80%. They're not going to be perfect. And as a result, now, instead of having 100% of the money from one, I have 80% of the profit or money from 5. 8 times 5 is 400. So that I get 400% of the money, but it's from 5 that are good versus 1 that is great. And psychologically, to be okay with it being not quite as good or as efficient or not quite the way you would do it, psychologically is a big shift. So that's, it's easy to say, it's hard to do.
Are you ready to let go? There was a client that I work with, and it took him 10 years to get his general manager to run the business, where he only attends 1 2-hour or 2 to 3 hour monthly board meeting, and he doesn't have anything else to do with the business whatsoever. Other than he receives an email that says the board packed beforehand. So, it took him a long time, but to his credit, the day came and he shut it down and he said, this is now yours to run. I'm going to my farm. And he went to his farm and, played with cows and chickens.
And that helps. I have another client who owns probably 50 or 60 companies. And it's been easier for him along the way because he was handing off this business to go focus on the next, other exciting new opportunity or something else. So again, psychologically, there's different frameworks that allow you to do it. So one, you got to be ready and committed to have someone to do it. And they got to have some of their own autonomy to do it their way and put their spin on it. Second thing, so once you're there emotionally, is to really be clear on what this role is and what it is. You got to be crystal clear what it takes. Oh, I'm going to have a general manager. Well, what does that mean? I'm going to have a president. What does that mean? Yeah. What do they do? What do they not do? What authority do they have? What authority do they not have? What does success look like? What does it not look like? And really, really thinking about who somebody needs to be to thrive in that role. And this sounds straightforward, but a lot of people, this is where people get burned. They're not clear enough on what the role is and isn't, and what it takes for someone to win there.
And when do you fire them? Like, if you were to take on a job, the thing that you really, I think everybody really wants to know is, this is the circumstance under which you will be fired. And
I see. So at what point is it it's so not tolerable that you don't get to stay? Got it. Yes.
Yeah. You want to have that conversation at the beginning. This is how you succeed. But then the opposite of that is, this is how you get fired. Now, I don't want to fire you, so let's stay away from that and let's focus on the success.
I like it.
But if you don't know how you're going to get fired, then suddenly it's this spectrum of doing things that upset people that you don't really know. It's the same for any role, but especially in this role, because the great fear of people, going back to kind of number one, the great fear is that I hand it all over, and then 1, 2, 3 months in, people are coming up to me and saying, oh, you know what? Like, this new leader, I don't think he's got it. I think we've made a really big mistake. That's the worst nightmare that you want to avoid in this situation.
Right. And they're probably going to say that no matter what, because people don't like change. And they often don't like the new boss or how the boss is changing things. So the chances is that's going to happen. You just want to ensure it's more resistance to change or some adaptation versus a serious screw up.
Yeah. And assuming that people will be going to do that, that only reinforces that point for everybody to a degree. We've got to know, you know what, if the retention rate is there, or whatever the metrics are, if the profit rates are there, if the growth rates are there, that's what matters. And, we'll work through those issues that you've mentioned at the board level.
Right. And the culture, which we'll talk to in a couple ideas down the road here. Right. It's not just the numbers. If it's just numbers, they could kill the company. But yeah, so being clear, we're both big advocates for a methodology called top grading. And so much we're even doing an education seminar coming up on it. And it's, with that they call it the job scorecard, is where you get mathematically clear on what the job needs. What are the specific measures of success? How do you measure whether you got a good one or not? Not how they look, not how they talk, not how you feel, but the business measures. And then assessing this person on just different skills they call competencies you need to have. It makes it way easier. And there's other tools you can use. We find this to be the best. The job scorecard from Top Grading. We require it when people are doing key hires. This project we're doing right now, we've made a scorecard for the CEO role, and we spent a lot of time getting that scorecard right.
And what
then
types
anyone
of
that would be at
things?
what's that?
What types of things does that scorecard have in it for clarity, to clarify what it means for those who might not know?
Yeah. So it would have an overview of a paragraph about what the job is. Most job descriptions are like 2 pages of words about a job. So a paragraph about the job, a list of key responsibilities, things that person is responsible to do, like to ensure that the relationship is maintained with the board of directors and that there's effective board meetings every month, and sales and new business development to make sure that we continue to add the right new accounts and working with the head of business development on that, etc. Then there's measures of success, which are the financial measures, right? Measures of revenue growth or profitability growth or employee engagement or a culture index. The numbers that we just say that the CEO is doing things right, but it's not just financial, it's culture, because in this company, culture is very, very important. And then those competencies, which are how capable are they at these 50 different things that matter. And even the act of getting clear on this helps you understand the type of person. It takes it from being a role that 1,000 people could do down to a role that probably 10 or 15 people could do, because it's so much crisper and clearer. And the way we look at it is as I was talking with Chris, who's the president of Top Grading, the other day. We did a webinar for our network, and I said to him, most job descriptions are like a sketch of a building you want to build done by a 6-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is that this job description or job scorecard is an architect's rendering of the building. That's it. Child's chicken scratch to architect's rendering. And we're getting much clearer up front, and we got a better chance of winning. So you got to know what it looks like, what it's going to take, and really getting clear up front. So let's move on to the next one.
Number 4. Which is
actually number 3. Number 3, I think we're still on 3, Brad.
It could possibly be number 3. Yeah,
I think it might. But let's give it a go with number 3. Yes.
Deep interviewing. So we've got the scorecard. You're ready to let go. So number 3 is the deep interviewing. So normally in this top grading methodology, we're saying we want to have a level of interviewing which is much deeper than most job roles would anticipate. So that could be, my take on it would be about a minimum of 3 interviews for a normal role, which is a telephone interview, and then 2 1 to 2 hour interviews, right? To get an average, let's say not frontline, but an average kind of role within a company to get the right person, which takes a lot of time. But for someone to run your business, it's a whole new ballgame. I think that this involves interviews with the leadership team, interviews with maybe the mid-management team, maybe taking them out to dinner with your spouse, maybe even your external accountants or lawyers, some kind of level like that, so that you're getting a 360-degree view on this person and how are they going to interact with the people that matter, going deeper and further.
Yes. And all of those interviews will give you a sense of how they interact with people that matter, that they want to be nice to. And it may not be who they are, but it is this, you will learn a lot about them. And so like we're doing this process for a company right now. And so, what we would be for sure doing is an interview that is 4 to 5 hours long.
Mm.
And we're going to go back to their when they were in high school and do it's called and you go through their career and digging deep to understand things they did well and where they didn't do well and how they interacted with their boss. And it's a character uncovering and competency discovery over 4 to 5 hours with that person to get incredible amounts of data of what they're about. That will be helpful. And then going back and talking to at least 3 or 4 or 5 of the people they reported to throughout their career, not their friends and their family, but bosses or boards if they're a CEO already, in the past in their career, but talking to people that have worked with them to get the real deal. Those two things I just described will give you 10 times the data you would get from any other process, and probably triple the success rate. Like it's a big, now, then the things you've talked about, Brad, 100%, meeting the other people, because those people will pick up things, but if they're not professional interviewers, they're pretty easy to bullshit. It's pretty easy to put on a good game face and then find out 6 months later you got although the social stuff is important, because sometimes even though they could be amazing, they might not show up right, or they could show up well. But
go back to the mid-managers. A simple question: after the mid-managers have spent time with a candidate, would you be proud to report to this person? Like, yes or no? And if no,
exactly, it gives them a sense. Yeah. Exactly. And then what is it that they're picking up they like or they don't like? And then that's another piece of data to take in. Absolutely. We're also a believer in that process of doing some assessments as well. I'm a big fan of psychometric assessments. It doesn't say the person will be good at the job. It just tells you how they're wired.
Yeah.
And we use both DISC and Enneagram, and I am telling you, what you learn about a person, DISC gives you a simple baseline of how they operate, and it would eliminate some people from the role because of their DISC. It could potentially, but Enneagram gives you insight into their wiring and their psychological injury and their psychological makeup and how they're going to show up in different situations. So that also helps you. It doesn't say whether they'll be good or bad. It just tells you how they will handle different situations, just deeply understanding that person. And it'll help us, when we get into the number 4 we wanted to talk to before. It also helps us with that one a little bit as well.
Yeah. Number 4, of course, the culture and experience fit. I remember, how is this person going to interact and handle your culture? Are they going to complement it or add? Is the culture going to be better or worse? Are they going to, have you ever run your hands along shark skin? Shark skin. It's very, it's very, very rough one way and very smooth another way. Are they going to be with or against the grain in terms of culture? I remember one of the clients I worked with bought a business and we spent about 7 months during the due diligence and everything working on the culture and how we're going to integrate the culture. Now, it was still not perfect, but it was so much better because we thought, how will we integrate this culture into our culture Because if you like, we were buying a business that was, in terms of the industry, they were more competent, or they were viewed as being more professional, let's say. So
Yep.
we needed to buy someone who was more professionally viewed, certainly integrate them, and then come out with a better culture. And that translates in this sense as well. How much time do you need to spend? How will this person fit into your culture? Will they be an addition?
Yeah. And will they not become a toxic or a high performing jerk? Right? Because they could be excellent at the job, but if they're not consistent with the culture, it's going to create a lot of friction and drama. Or in worst case scenario for CEO, they bring in some of their past colleagues and they change the culture, which I've seen happen before. You know, if you've got a person who likes to drink way too much, there's a pretty good chance they'll bring some of the drinking buddies or surround themselves with other people who like to party all the time, you know, or whatever it happens to be. I'm just, as a silly example.
Yeah.
Not that silly, but it's understanding is the natural way in which they behave, behave and treat people. Is it consistent with how you do it? Now you got to have your culture clearly defined, but it's a big thing. And on the fit, I mean, I've seen people off culture and they're a nightmare. I remember one guy I never forget in the Middle East I was working, and this guy was a general manager of a business. And I went toe to toe with the guy, and we almost got into a fight. Remember, I'm a consultant in the company. He was so rude and disrespectful to people, and condescending and off culture. And I called him on it. And it's one of those ones where I started watching his hands to make sure he wasn't going to take a swing at me.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. And he was promptly no longer at the company. His behavior was absolutely unacceptable. But the fit one is the more interesting one. I remember this guy that we hired. I won't say his name. Wonderful man. Loved the guy. The challenge is he came from a company that sold big earth moving equipment and heavy duty equipment. Long sales cycle, big ticket items. Well, he came into another business that has a daily sales cycle and lower ticket items. One was business to business, the other is business to consumer. So even though he was highly skilled, totally fit the culture, awesome guy, he's a B2B, expensive, long sales cycle guy. I mean, he might as well not even have been a business person. Like he was from another planet, and it was the wrong planet.
Yeah.
There was no way, because a daily or hourly sales business to consumer business it's not even the same. And awesome guy, and it just didn't work, and it was painful because he's trained in a different environment. It'd be like a pilot, someone in the military, being a jet fighter pilot versus a tank driver. The pilot might be able to drive a tank, probably not. Tank driver definitely would not be able to fly the plane.
Yeah.
And it's just not fair to the person when we put them in those roles, and we do it all the time. That their experience is not similar in the dynamics and environment they work in. It's not about the industry. Yeah. It's about the dynamics and the working and the processes and stuff like that.
And the second part of that is experience fit. So there's an absolute decision. If you're forced to make this decision sooner, rather than our best practice of having 2 to 3 years to grow someone into the role, do you hire externally or do you promote from internally? And how does their experience fit? You gave the B2B versus B2C example, or business to business versus business to consumer example. It maybe they're from within or not from within the industry. There are a whole range of factors. Will people respect someone if they've come from not your industry, or will that be a value add? There's so many cultural and experience considerations that you've got to make here. So
and the root of it is, can they thrive in the role and do great work and lead the people well, consistent with your culture?
Yeah.
Right. That's awesome. Let's go to number 5, Brad.
So this is onboarding them and your team. So let's imagine that we tick those first 4 boxes. You're ready to hand over. You've got a good job scorecard that defines what it is and what it isn't. You've done the fantastic interviews, amazing interviews, and everyone's confident. You know they're going to be a culture and experience fit. You've signed the contract. They've come on board. Now it's about onboarding. So with that context, I want you to imagine you're looking at the Olympics and you're looking at the relay race. And it's the baton race. There's a person running with the baton. Now, what we normally see is a person runs up, they extend their arm. The other person is running alongside them. They extend their arm back. The baton is passed, and then they start running faster as the previous baton holder runs slower. That is a good analogy to good onboarding, because what so many people do is they see the person and then they chuck the baton up in the air, hoping the person is going to catch it in the relay race. And 80% of the time they drop the baton, right?
And then they blame the person that didn't catch the baton that was 20 feet over their head.
Yeah.
Or baton, as we would call it. Yes.
Yeah. That's so good onboarding is like that seamless, beautiful, seamless transition that we see in the relay race in the Olympics. And you've got to think about that. And that begins with what we said earlier, which is, what does success look like in the role? How do you define success if you're willing to let go? And what are the milestones? This should not be a one-day handover unless, look, I can, even if you're in the situation like we gave where someone has passed away, unfortunately, or something like that, right? Even in those terrible, I still believe it should be a longer onboarding. And I reckon 6 months is a number I'm going to put out there for a role of this significance. Would be best practice. Whereas it might be 3 months.
And whether that's by the board or by the person or whatever it happens, the previous CEO.
Yep.
It's, I got it.
And so, and that could mean that the first 60 or 90 days, they just shut up. They just close their mouth and observe and walk around and let the business run and gather information and data, whatever. Like, I don't want to be prescriptive on that, other than to say it's not a 1 month onboarding and it's not a 90 day. I think it's a longer onboarding for this type of role. And that is getting an understanding of what is your definition of success. What do they need to do in week 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6? What do they need to do? What are all of the things that they've got to do through that path?
Yep, it's awesome. And being clear, and as you mentioned, like the checkpoints, right? There should be checkpoints both with the team around them and them. Hey, how's this going? What's working? What's not? You don't want to be in their way, but you got to make sure that it is actually working. And then secondly, what we recommend, and there's one of these I'm working on right now, and I recommend that there is a monthly, ideally to start with, check-in with a third party. So as a coach facilitator, I have with the entrepreneur and their president, I have a monthly, hey, what's working? What's not working? How do we dial this in? What do we have to align around? What do we have to debate so that stuff doesn't build up? So it's a transition plan of having someone else facilitate discussions, because some people are really, really good at putting their concerns on the table. Yeah. Some aren't. And there's a lot of transfer of control involved here. And most people suffer from a lack of direction. They don't get enough direction from a CEO or a CEO from a board sometimes. So it's helping that process along to make sure that the challenging and valuable conversations happen along the way.
Yeah. And within that onboarding, it comes back to, when will we fire them? So after 3 months, we might do something like a 360. If that's an overwhelming negative 360, we're going to put you on performance management, and there's a good chance that you'll be, fired. Or if we don't see the growth or whatever it might be, like, build that into the onboarding so that we know everybody's clear and transparent on the same page. So let's maybe move on to number 6, the last one.
And by the
here.
way, I'm a big fan of doing that kind of 360 check-in because it helps the person to make sure that they're growing in the right, because sometimes they have blind spots. Okay, let's go on to the last one. Go ahead, Brad.
Follow the org chart. So you've hired the person, they've been onboarded or they're being onboarded. But you've got these relationships that you've built over many, many years with staff members in the business. They respect you. You like them. They like you. Sometimes they might want to go past the new leader to you. Maybe they know where you live. Maybe they got your phone number. Maybe you have a barbecue together or whatever it might be. But
or maybe you're used to talking every day about stuff. You're used to having lunch every Friday or beers every Thursday or Saturday morning chats while you're driving to your kid's soccer game. Like, who knows? You have this channel of communication and this bond, and it's awesome.
But that can be detrimental to success in the role. That can undermine that person's contribution, and it can be massively damaging. I go back to
massively.
Yeah, the successful example I provided before. He handed the reins over on a set date, and he said, "Now I'm going to play with chickens and cows on my farm," and that's it. And he doesn't.
And
interfere.
That's not normally what happens.
I know, that's why I raised it, because
I know it's beautiful, but the thing is that you could do the perfect job, but then when Sally in HR or John in finance messages you on a Saturday morning saying you're not gonna believe what's happening, drama, problem, your desire to take care of your long-term loyal people and take care of the business kicks in. And next thing you know, you get involved.
Yeah.
And it's not that you shouldn't listen to these people, right? And I had to learn this as a coach. It's not that you shouldn't listen to them, but you need to hear them and direct them back to the proper channel to deal with their issue. The proper channel is not you. It's to go to their manager or their manager to go to their manager to deal with it in the appropriate channels.
So you've got to have a job description for yourself. This is what I do. This is what I don't do in my new role. And this is the line in the sand between where the two of us interact.
Yeah, and I'll give you a great example. A CEO I worked with is also in the Middle East. He ran a large retail business. And when he would walk through the store, and in this case, it was a department store they're walking to. So there was him, and then the person who is the manager of all the department stores, and then the manager of the specific store is there on this walk as they're walking through and looking at things. As he's walking through and talking, he knows if he gives anything that sounds like direction, it's like he's talking directly to the store manager, not through his boss. Yep. So what he would do is he would go through a walk and he would ask a lot of questions. He would ask questions and wonder and appreciate and be, give positive feedback to people. Mm-hmm. But if something wasn't right, he didn't say a thing.
Yeah.
Something wasn't right, he would wait till the end and then go to the head, the leader of all the department stores and say to her, "Hey, here's some things I noticed. You might want to think about it. I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe you noticed," but he wouldn't do anything that had anything to do with any feedback of sort, because it would be taken as direction, and then he's undermining the person who is responsible for all the stores. And that is easy to say, hard to do. And if you're running a factory and you see something wrong, you don't jump in and say, "Oh my gosh." And I mean, if it's a safety thing, yes. But in normal course of business, you go to the person who manages the factory and they run through the proper chain of the. So follow the org chart or follow the chain of command. Sorry, I'll cut you off there, Brad. Go ahead.
No worries. It's the same as parenting, okay? Children will often say, they'll go and ask one parent, "Can I go to my friend's house?" And that parent says no. And then they close that door and then they go to the other parent and they say, without even saying that I said to the first parent, can I go to my friend's house? And then that parent may say yes. And then they go, well, I've got a yes, I'm out of here. So between two parents, the key is to be on the same page, to use that analogy. They're following the org chart. We're aligned and we're not undermining one another. We are at all times. If your mother said that you can't go, or if your father said that you can't go, you can't go. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm supportive of the other person. To translate that again, I'm supportive of the org chart. Let's go to the manager and let's talk to them. Awesome.
You got it. And that's the right way to do it. Easy to say, hard to do. So let's wrap this up. Ideally, when we're looking to bring in someone else to run your business, you want to have a few people you're grooming along the way over the years, so that when that eventuality happens, you've got options. Or maybe you're down to one amazing person. And if you're not in that position now, or you don't have people that will, quote, be in the running for your job, what can you do to make sure there's people who are in the running? And then you got to make sure so that's the ideal. And then when it's time, you got to make sure you're ready to let go. That is critical. And the next thing is to be really clear on what the role is and what isn't. We use the scorecard from Top Grading because it clearly mathematically defines what great looks like in the role. And then you got to really deeply interview people to really understand who they are and get the facts, right? And just like with the scorecard, with the interview, we don't want the children's sketch of the tower you want to build. You want the architect's detailed drawings. And heck, by the time we're done interviewing, we get right down to the furniture placement in the rooms and where the pipes are and the wires are and the finishings, like very detailed architecture and understanding of that building. Culture and experience fit, just to make sure they're naturally where they've come from and the way they're used to working is going to work here. Onboarding them with your team, getting things up to speed, and having safety checks along the way to make sure it works, giving them the right feedback, and knowing that if it doesn't work, you have to let them go. What does that look like? And then finally, follow the org chart, follow the chain of command. Don't make any decisions, give any direction or any feedback to their direct reports, because they're still going to want to come to you. You can listen, but you can't give feedback or decide. You got to push them back to talk to their new boss, not their old boss.
So it's really hard. It's really challenging to find the right person to run your business, but it's definitely something that we come across time and time and time again. And so, this is a bit of a checklist that we see is valuable to follow through. So in closing, thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Growth Whisperers. I'm Brad Giles, joined as always by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence. You can find us at YouTube. If you YouTube search the Growth Whisperers, you can find myself, Brad, at evolutionpartners.com.au, and you can find Kevin at lawrenceandco.com. So until next week, thanks very much. We hope you have a great week.